aftermath continue to ravage the city of Houston tonight. Thousands have been forced to flee their homes to escape flooding caused by rainfall levels that have been measured at 35 inches or more.
These kids need help.
I mean, they're soaked to the bone.
They're completely soaked.
The water was just gushing in. Yeah.
A couple of people with boats, and we want to see if we can get them to come, at least get my mom.
Yeah.
Come get her out.
We didn't think help was coming until you guys came.
It was about 5 a.m. 1 minute, everything was fine, but we could see the water was really high. The next minute, it's rushing in through every door we had.
I'm bedridden. There's water in all the beds in the house. We've lost every strip of furniture, every couch, everything.
What does it mean to see all these people coming out with the boats and just everybody just coming together to do this?
Texas pride. Texas pride. That's all I can say.
President Trump had this to say about the flooding in Texas in advance of a planned visit to the area on Tuesday.
We are one American family. We hurt together. We struggle together. And believe me, we endure together. We are one family. To the people of Texas and Louisiana, we are 100% with you. We're praying for you. We're working closely with your leaders and officials.
Fox correspondent Steve Harrigan is in Rosenberg, Texas for us tonight. He joins us now. Steve, what's it like?
Tucker, officials in suburbs all around Houston are telling people get out while you can. That's because this rain, which is coming in sideways right now, just hasn't stopped. 9 inches here in the past 24 hours alone. It is flooding roads, but even worse than that, you can see this giant sinkhole behind me. That's been getting bigger by the hour. There are real questions about the basic structure of some of these smaller bridges. Will they hold up? The shelters, 10 of them here in this county alone, are filling up quickly. They've even turned furniture stores into shelters. People are arriving wet and cold. A call is out for doctors, nurses, and baby formula. People are calling for help by hanging sheets or towels on their houses. They're calling 911. They're also using social media. Messages like "Save me" with their address. The evacuation, 7 neighborhoods here in all, have gone from voluntary to mandatory as the water level here continues to rise. Tucker, back to you.
Steve Harrigan, thanks for that. Trace Gallagher is in the Woodlands, Texas. That's just north of Houston. He joins us now. Trace, you there?
Tucker, about 50 miles north of where Steve Harrigan is, and the rain is coming down here as well. If you look across the street, you can see the water actually rushing and rising at the same time. We were just watching a group of people walk over here to this convenience store, and they were about chest high in water. And then over here, they're about to shut down one of the major arteries that goes into Houston. This is I-45, and you can see traffic going north is fine, but you want to go into Houston, it is not going to happen. We have also learned that in just the past couple of hours, they have mandatory evacuations about 20 miles north of us in Conroe. They're very concerned about a river up there overflowing its banks, which is certainly no surprise because in Harris County, Houston and surrounding Harris County, all 22 watersheds are bursting at the seams. Too much water. They're trying to let it go, but they've got to let it go in a way that they don't flood more homes. We should know there are reports from a local affiliate that a van with a family of 6 got washed away. We called the sheriff's office. We're trying to get some confirmation on that report. It has not yet happened, but the Associated Press just minutes ago updated the death toll now to 3. That is expected to rise, and we are told there are still some people missing, but the rain comes down. They keep telling us it's going to get easier, it's going to get lighter. So far, we just haven't seen it. Tucker.
Doesn't seem that way. Trace Gallagher outside Houston, thanks for that. Well, the situation in Texas, Houston specifically, could be far worse without heroic rescue efforts, some of which are ongoing tonight. Danya Davis was evacuated from the city by boat. She joins us now by Skype. Danya, can you tell us what happened?
We were with a couple of families over off North Braeswood and watching the waters. Thought we could get out in time to come to our house in West University. we're not told to evacuate. The house is not flooded in 7 years. We've had several rains that high. Tried to get out with the street showing, the curb not covered. About 20 minutes later when we left, the water was over the hood of my car about 100 yards out from the house.
Whoa.
So we pulled over, called our friends. They waded over to us, got my kids out of the car. We abandoned the car. We're at the house about 4:30 in the morning. Water started pouring in the front door. And got all the kids to the second level, stayed there, and waited for rescue. Posted something on Facebook for someone to send us a boat. And as luck would have it, we did have some friends that came and rescued us by boat.
That's amazing.
That's where I met your reporter. There were 5 children and 5 adults and a dog that were rescued.
That's incredible. So your power stayed on even though the house was flooded?
We powered off the downstairs AC and left the upstairs power on. So yes, we were lucky to have power and phone charging and iPads for the children.
Amazing. Where'd the boat take you?
It took us to 610 in Beach Nut, which is just inside the loop where the FEMA boats were launching. And one of our workmates was on the other side of 610 in his truck ready to take us wherever we needed to go. We couldn't get anywhere inside the city where I live 3 miles away. So he took us to his house in Sienna Plantation, which we all know as the night went on, that area was a mandatory evacuation as well. So we had refuge in a dry land for a night and drove on the sidewalks with 10 people in the truck back to our side of town at 59, which was clear. So we were very lucky to get home about midday today.
What a disaster. Water pouring in the front door. That's not something you expect when you live in a big city like Houston. That's amazing. Donnie, we're glad you're back. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll keep you updated on all the news out of Texas tonight. There's a lot of it. Meanwhile, the violent left has made another appearance in Berkeley, California. A planned anti-Marxism rally on Sunday was canceled because of fears of left-wing violence. Those fears turned out to be justified. Thousands of marchers showed up. Thanks to the presence of Antifa anarchists, things got violent very fast. Watch. Joey Gibson organized the Patriot Prayer Rally that was supposed to be held on Saturday but was canceled due to fears of violence. Again, fears that turned out to be justified. Gibson was in Berkeley on Sunday, and while there, he was pushed, punched, pepper sprayed, assaulted. The police looked on while a lot of this took place. Check out this video from his group's YouTube page. Later, police were seen... Later, police detained Gibson and his friend. According to the LA Times, they were arrested for, quote, running at police, one of the most misleading news stories ever published. Police themselves told the San Francisco Chronicle the two were not arrested, but instead were rescued from dangerous protesters. Not exactly clear what happened. That's why we wanted to have Joey Gibson back on the show. He joins us tonight. Joey, a good friend of mine, Matt Labash, as a reporter, was covering you, called me last night after all this happened and said he'd never seen anything like it. This violence just erupted out of nowhere so fast, all aimed at you. Couple obvious questions. There are police all around. Why did none of them come to your aid as you were being beaten in the head and pepper sprayed?
Well, we've talked to quite a few police officers. Most police officers, they join the force because they want to help people out in these situations. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's people higher up who are not allowing them to do it. Trust me, they didn't want to stand around and just watch, okay? We have mayors all over California and in this country that are using the police forces for their own political gain.
Did you I just want to be totally clear. This is the third time you've been on this show. You've been repeatedly described as an alt-right figure, a white supremacist, a white nationalist. You've said that none of that is true, and I believe you. I just want to be clear. Did you say anything provocative, use racial slurs? Did you say anything before you were just pepper sprayed and hit in the head?
No, we constantly preach love. It's our thing. That's what we want to do. We want to preach love, unity, and peace. These things are really important. We have to have that in our country. We walked in there, you know, giving the peace sign with our hands up. Now, we knew that there was a potential that people would try to, you know, assault us. But that's why we had our hands up, because we didn't want to be aggressive. You know, we didn't want to go in there like we want to fight. We just want to be able to go in there and exist in America. That's all we want to do. We want to be able to exist in the middle of a public park, you know, in Berkeley, you know, or wherever that may be. And we were around a bunch of moderate liberals who were holding signs like love and peace and like nonviolence and all this stuff. And then they just sit there and watch, you know, Antifa just barge in there and just start attacking all of us. And I'm just wondering, you know, moderate left, like how long are you going to stay silent on Antifa? Okay, the politicians, the mayor of Berkeley, the mayor in San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi, you know, Feinstein, all of you. How long are you going to stay silent on Antifa? Because in their silence, it's almost like they're just using Antifa to their benefit to attack free speech.
That's exactly right. They're cowards. One of the most upsetting things I've seen on tape in a long time is the end of the video that we just showed, where you're walking backward with your hands up. Someone throws a bottle of urine at you. Someone else hits you. There are police officers directly behind you. They do nothing. And then you wind up in handcuffs. How did that happen?
I think that what they're trying to do is they're trying to just de-escalate the situation, and I think that we're also in a secure area too. So I think they just want to put cuffs on us and walk us away to kind of see what's going on. Once they understood the situation, they took the cuffs off and they just started rinsing us off in a hose because I was pepper sprayed like 5 times.
Did anyone get arrested? We're watching the video now. If you're getting hit in the head with a pole, there you are getting pepper sprayed. Did any of those people get arrested?
I don't know. I know there's about 13 arrests yesterday. I don't know if any of that had to do with me, but we got to understand, man. There was journalists just getting beat in the streets for like 5 minutes. I mean, it was horrendous. It's a horrible thing that happened yesterday. I think America, you got to understand. Like a lot of people think that if you just leave Antifa alone, just don't talk about them and they'll just go away. No, we got to stand up to Antifa. You got to talk to your politicians. Say, do you support Antifa? Do you support their violent tactics? I mean, guys, if you go on YouTube and you search up the film, there is horrendous things that happened yesterday. And this is America. Okay, this is America. This is where we should be able to go and just exist in public, say our part, just speak, just be Americans without the threat of violence, without people dressed in all black, covering up their faces, just beating people up, beating them to the pulp. I mean, there's a lot of horrible injuries yesterday.
This is a political militia that is doing the bidding, in effect, of Nancy Pelosi and Governor Jerry Brown and the mayor of Berkeley and all these supposedly mainstream Democratic politicians. And this is a militia hurting American citizens for saying what they think. It's terrifying. Joey, you're a brave man. I appreciate your coming on tonight again.
Thank you.
Up ahead, we'll bring you more coverage of what turned out to be disastrous flooding in the state of Texas. You're looking live at what used to be streets in the city of Houston. People are floating on them, as you can see. Meanwhile, in the state of California, lawmakers there are considering a bill that could put you in jail for up to a year for using the wrong pronouns. A supporter of that bill will be here next. You're looking at live pictures of Houston, Texas, where floods have devastated that city. That's not an overstatement, and put thousands to flight. We'll continue to give you every update on the situation there as we get them. Now, the following is a real news story. It's not a joke. A legislator in California has introduced legislation that, if it passes, will impose prison time on people who fail to use other people's preferred pronouns. State Senator Scott Wiener's bill would apply to nursing homes and other elderly care facilities and would impose up to a year in prison on caregivers who, quote, willfully and repeatedly fail to use a transgender resident's preferred name or pronouns. Robin Biro is a Democratic strategist. He supports all this. He joins us tonight. Robin, thanks for coming on. So it doesn't sound very American, the idea that you go to jail if you say something someone else doesn't want you to say. Don't we have a Bill of Rights that would prevent that?
Absolutely, the First Amendment. And let me say this, I want to expose my own ignorance to this issue. I myself was ignorant to this issue until I actually read the bill and got informed. And what I found out in the bill, it actually says that there was a 2011 survey, which that's a bit dated, but it did show that there were 6,456 respondents, and 28% of those suffered harassment, actually, from medical providers. 19% of those, these are LGBT elders, they had been denied care. So that necessitated this bill. I would assert, let's be fair, that I think you're cherry picking, because this bill is not just about transgender use of pronouns and all that. It's about all of LGBT rights being included in the Patient's Bill of Rights that's posted on the doors.
I'm sure there are lots of things I would agree with in the bill, and just to be totally clear, I think you should call people what they want to be called. You know, I mean, I think you should be polite to people, and I try to be. But there's a principle at stake here that you're ignoring for political reasons, and I'm a little surprised that you are. And that is a really simple one. It's called free speech, and you have the right to express your view. And if other people don't like it, they don't like it. But you can't be put in prison for saying what you think is true. And this bill seems to ignore that long-standing right that we've enjoyed, and I find it terrifying for that reason.
And I knew you were going to say that. I will contend that these are our employees. They are regulated by the government. They already have a Patient's Bill of Rights that addresses some of these. What's left out are protections for the LGBT community. They are already, let's look at this, Tucker, if you will. The elderly community is already a marginalized community. But think about the fact, if you are LGBT or even, like the worst, transgender, they're probably the most disenfranchised. They are the most vulnerable. And I want to say this, just consider, if you will, I myself am openly gay. Say 30 years from now, I've been in a relationship for a couple decades, and this bill wasn't in place, it would deny my partner the ability to come and visit me, because a nurse might have a problem with it.
No, but again, you're skirting the point that I'm making, which is this bill criminalizes speech. If you use the wrong word, you can be put in jail. That is grotesque. And I understand that you're enthusiastic about expanding rights for LGBT elders, okay? But why in the world would you, as an American who once wore the uniform, support a bill that would criminalize speech?
Because elder abuse is inherently wrong. And I will read the bill. It says...
No, slow down. Speech is not abuse.
No, I'm talking about abuse. This is, understand this, misusing someone's pronoun is abuse. We see all the time people do this as a form of abuse. I follow the alt-right blogs where they call Michelle Obama a man. That is abusive.
Should they go to jail for that?
Should not be accepted.
Should they go to jail for that?
But if it's done in a medical thing, what constituted, hold on, what constituted, Tucker, is prolonged, continuous, intentional abuse by a healthcare provider. That is abuse. That should be criminal.
It should be criminal. Okay, what about thinking it? What if I have unpleasant thoughts about you and you could somehow find out I had them? Should I go to jail too? Is that abuse as well?
No, that's human nature.
That's human nature. But using the wrong pronoun should get me. How many times? Okay, how many? Well, abuse is a subjective term. We're not talking about physical abuse. We're talking about saying something the person hearing it doesn't like.
Mental abuse.
Mental abuse, right? Which is a totally subjective category. Once again, how many times would I have to misuse a pronoun before I went to prison?
It has to be, I already gave you the 3 criteria, prolonged, continuous, intentional abuse by a healthcare provider. There has to be a history of it.
Let's stop using euphemisms here and just get to the core facts. How many times would I have to misuse a pronoun before the police came, handcuffed me, and sent me to a prison cell?
It's not just a pronoun. Like I said, you're cherry picking. This also is denying.
That's what it does. Lots of things. No, but the bill says a lot of things. But I'm specific. No, but it also says what I'm saying it says. I'm not making this up. So it says a lot of things, sure. But what I care about is the criminalization of speech. And I'm asking you a very simple question. How many times do I need to use the wrong pronoun before police with guns show up at my house and handcuff me and deprive me of my freedom and throw me in a prison cell. How many times? 4 times? 5 times? How many times?
That has not been. I posted the entire bill on my Twitter at Robin Biro. You can read the entire bill. That does not say a specific number. I will say that.
You're dodging it. You're dodging it. Last question. There are a lot of things that I don't like to hear. People call me names. I find it abusive. I have mental anguish as a result, let's say. Should they go to jail for that?
If they are your health care provider and they do it intentionally to mentally abuse you, and it's stated on the wall in the Health Care Bill of Rights, yes. Yeah. And if they do it over and over
deliberately, when did you get in favor of,
yes.
These are like minimum wage workers, and you're like, you know what I mean, bullying them, basically. It's so weird. I wonder, I hope you'll watch this tape when this is over and ask yourself if you're really on the right side of this question. Because it used to be like people had their opinions, they could express them, and no one threatened to send them to jail.
Listen, like I said, I didn't used to be on the right side of this issue, but I read the bill and educated myself.
I read it
and
too,
I get it.
And it scared me. Okay, thanks, Robin. I appreciate it. Smashing statues, that was last week. Now the left is covering them with burqas, like they're Afghan women under the Taliban. We'll talk to a writer from The Federalist about this new trend. Stay tuned. Plus, the latest on that catastrophic flooding in Houston. There it is. That's the city of Houston. You're looking at it right there. We'll be right back. America's Maoist revolution continues across the country. Enjoying it? In the Bay Area, a Catholic school has removed many of its religious statues to avoid giving offense to people who don't care for them. In New York, Columbus, Peter Stuyvesant, even Ulysses S. Grant could all be headed for the landfill. They're offensive too somehow. In Charlottesville, Virginia, city officials have covered Confederate monuments to Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson with burqas to keep them from offending the very sensitive residents of that city. Robert Trzynski is a writer for The Federalist. He says these statue burqas are a sign of liberals' panic over what they've unleashed. Robert, thanks a lot for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So what is this about? I mean, I thought that you made a really smart point when you said covering a statue in a burqa gives power to the statue it wouldn't ordinarily have or otherwise have.
Well, I think it's the assumption that it's almost like the power is in the sculpture, in this inanimate object, instead of the people that are reacting to it. You know, a year ago, nobody was reacting to these things in any inflammatory way at all. They were in the middle of these parks. Occupy Charlottesville, the local edition of Occupy Wall Street. It wasn't very big. But Occupy Charlottesville set themselves up in Lee Park, and they didn't react to the statue at all. These were the Occupy people. That wasn't an issue for them. They were just doing their Occupy thing there without even looking at the statue. So nobody reacted to this statue because of its own power before a year ago. And so it's this sort of idea that it's almost this superstitious approach to it, like, the idols of the old gods are raising angry spirits, so we have to cover them. And specifically what happened here in Charlottesville is last week there was a city council meeting that was open to the public, and it was stormed by these leftist protesters who spent all their time berating and yelling and angrily shouting at the city council members, even chased them out of the room for a while for their own security. And the city council members in Charlottesville are liberals. They're to the left. They're center left. They're the people who came up with the idea of removing these sculptures in the first place. And now they're getting chased out of their own city council meeting by angry leftist protesters.
Always. So the revolution eats itself, of course, always.
And it was at the end of that meeting that they voted to say, okay, let's cover these up with these giant black tarps. And they sort of look like modern art installations now. They're these giant blocky black things that cover up with these giant black tarps that I'm calling statue burqas. In order to, because we can't remove them yet, but we don't want them to stay there, so we're going to cover them up and hope people will pretend they're not there anymore.
Boy, I mean, now that we've smashed all these idols, I hope SAT scores go up and unemployment rates go down and incidences of cancer fall. I mean, there's so much energy, so much intensity focused on these symbolic matters. You sort of wonder, like, is this a way of ignoring the actual problems in our country?
This was the case made against this by a number of people locally, including there's a black man who spoke up prominently against it, saying, of all the problems that we have, this is not one of the top 10. This is not anywhere in the top of the list. Yeah, I think that, we've got North Korea launching nuclear missiles. We have Houston. We have the failure to repeal Obamacare. We don't know what's going to happen. It's a program that's failing, and we can't fix it, and we can't get rid of it. We've got the whole problem of the federal budget. And we're all fixated on this symbolic thing, but I think the reason we're fixated on it is to ask, what is it that people accomplish out of this? And I think the Charlottesville City Council, I think they thought this was going to be easy layup. This was going to be an easy thing for them to get a lot of good press and publicity for themselves and for the city. And it would all be sort of, it was a way of what's called virtue signaling, a way of saying, hey, look what good and great people we are that we did this wonderful, magnanimous thing. And they thought it was going to be easy, and they didn't think they were going to get into a serious conflict that was going to come home to the city in a major way. And they weren't really prepared for it. But if you ask what people are getting out of it, what they were getting out of it was this easy score of, look what great virtuous people we are, without really having to do anything of consequence.
It was a virtue hit. Meanwhile, half the country has no net worth, and everyone's, in hock to Citibank, and the country's falling apart. It's really, we're going to look back on this and be amazed by how frivolous it was. Robert, thank you. That was great.
Thanks for having me.
We're still on Hurricane Harvey and its aftermath in Texas, a lot more destructive than a lot of people predicted. We'll update you on all those developments when we come back. Plus, a tribe of American Indians is occupying land owned by Brown University. They say it was stolen centuries ago. Brown's one of the most liberal places in the world, and yet it's pretty much blowing them off. One of those tribe supporters will be here next to see if liberals are living up to their own values. Stay tuned. Here's our look at Houston, where floods have forced tens of thousands of people out of their homes. Here you see the rescued climbing out of the back of a truck. We'll continue to monitor the situation there. Pretty wet. Well, they call it Brown University, but could that just be a perverse misnomer? A group of activists say yes, the Ivy League school is, in fact, despite its name, one of the biggest beneficiaries of centuries of white supremacy. Members of the federally unrecognized Paconet tribe have set up an encampment on Brown University land. They say that land was stolen from their ancestors and must be returned to them. And yet, for some reason, the famously progressive school isn't racing to atone for its past wrongs, despite having more than $3 billion in its endowment. Nishu Washuwanog is Director General of the Federation of Aboriginal Nations of America. He supports the protest effort, and he joins us tonight. Nishu, thanks a lot for coming on.
Tucker, thank you for the opportunity.
So I'm a little confused. So here you have, you're a representative of an American Indian, that Brown basically is occupying the land of your ancestors. We know that Brown has historic ties to slavery, extensive historic ties to slavery, and it's very liberal. And yet they're kind of blowing you off. I don't understand why.
Well, they don't want to admit that they're wrong in this situation, and we, by law, are absolutely correct. So that's really where the problem comes in, not wanting to admit that they're wrong.
But I mean, gee whiz, Brown has, I think, I checked today, $3.2 billion in its endowment. That's more than the GDP of more than 40 countries worldwide. So you'd think they could take some of that money and make it right.
You would absolutely think that, and it just seems, once again, that they just don't want to do the right thing. I mean, we've laid out the law for them. We've given them all of the history. They understand everything we're saying, and it's just a matter of them not wanting to transfer the land over into the Poconoket Trust. So that's really what the situation is right now.
So, you ever go to Brown? You ever see what it's like? I mean, it's like a Four Seasons over there. It's so plush. I mean, the food options are, it's like a permanent Whole Foods subsidized. They've got a fitness center. It's acres. I mean, they've got just a dance studio. It's 4,000 feet. I mean, do you ever think, like, they have so much, why not share it with people whose ancestors they wronged?
Well, I mean, that's precisely the situation that's going on. And I actually grew up in a neighborhood adjacent to Brown for a little bit of history with my particular family bloodline, my uncle Chief Sunset was one of the last full-blood chiefs for my tribe. And he was in a neighborhood that was actually knocked down, and a Whole Foods was set up in that particular area. So you're talking about a lot of historical wrongdoings on the part of Brown, and the Poconokeets, as I mentioned, are fully, lawfully correct in this situation. There's no debating whether or not the land is theirs.
Do you see any irony in the name of Brown University? I mean, liberal?
Well,
I mean, does it make sense to you?
No, but I think what you're dealing with is a lot of northeastern sort of racism where it's not overt, it's very covert, but it points the finger at southern racism, but it doesn't want to acknowledge its own issues and its own challenges. So I think that's what's on display right now with Brown, and it's kind of disappointing, to be quite honest.
So why do you think the school has a right to its main campus? I mean, considering it was built on the suffering of oppressed peoples, don't you think it would be better used as an Indian reservation? Would your tribe be willing to use the Brown campus, and don't you think you'd use it a little better than they do as an Indian reservation?
Well, I'm not much into reservations. We roam freely on the land, but if you're asking if it's all on Indian land, yes, absolutely it is, and you have to get back into the history of where were the treaties that were gotten when the land was taken, where was the actual bill of sale that was passed on, something that says that land was theirs, and you're not going to find it.
So why don't you set up an encampment on the quad at Brown and help yourself to some of the delicious sushi they serve the rich kids who go there, and use the 9 swimming pools or whatever they've got in their dance studio? I mean, how do you think that will go over if you did that?
It'd probably go over pretty bad, but our people have always been people who try to do the right thing and move respectfully first. This situation that we're in right now, we approached the Attorney General of the state of Rhode Island in 2015 and expressed to them what this situation was and what our intention was, and we were just ignored for 2 years. Same thing with communications with Brown, so at some point, the disrespect has to end. And that's where we're at right now. We're hoping to work this out amicably with Brown so that those sorts of measures don't have to be taken. But, when you're being disrespected and when the law's not being followed, I think you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, and I think we might support you in that. Really quickly, though, here's my theory, and you tell me if you think it's right. So the Brown jumps up and down, all the students, we're so liberal on the side of oppressed peoples. I wonder if some of that is a cover for their own rottenness. They're basically running a $3 billion hedge fund, posing as a school, on the backs of oppressed people historically. Do you think maybe all the liberal stuff is so you won't look at them and kind of ask hard questions about where all the money came from?
I would agree with that to a certain extent. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy when you look to the north, and I think there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on. But, there's always 3 fingers pointing back at yourself when you point one at someone else.
I agree. Well, if you do set up an encampment on the quad, call us. We'll send a camera. Nisa, it's great to see you tonight.
Absolutely, Tucker. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks. Rescuers have been working nonstop in Houston to save people from rising floodwaters. Up next, we'll talk to one whose squad has saved more than 200 people this week. Stay tuned for a happy story about America for once. Well, about 36 inches of rain have fallen on some parts of East Texas in the last couple of days. The rain has not even stopped yet. The forecast the next few days, when will the rain stop? Adam Klotz has all of that. He's our meteorologist here at Fox, and he joins us now. Adam, what's the forecast?
Hey there, Tucker. Well, yeah, the rain continues here as we roll through the evening hours. Take a look at the coastline. Everything you're looking at highlighted in the red there, that is a tornado watch, means conditions are right for tornadoes. Since this has hit, since this Hurricane Harvey hit shore, we've had a good 32 spun up tornadoes, and we could still see some more as we roll through the overnight hours. Obviously, very heavy rain across the region. Still heavy showers back into the Houston area as well, the spot that's seen so much rain so far. Where's the system currently spinning? Well, it is just off the Texas coast. It's going to settle a little bit farther back out into the Gulf of Mexico. When it does so, picking up a little bit more moisture, but I'm expecting by Tuesday we begin to see this finally start to move a little bit and work its way back to the north, rerunning over parts of Houston. Good news is it's now on the good side, but we've got some very big rain. When does it finally stop? It's looking like Thursday into Friday, Tucker. That's when some of those folks finally drying off, put out those umbrellas, and take account to all the damage.
Man, that's a long time, Adam. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Will Blackstock is a volunteer with the Gulf Coast Rescue Squad. It's a group of boaters that have been working overtime to save locals from, from the storm. Will, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So what's your last 3 days been like?
Craziness.
I can't even imagine.
It's something that we've never seen anything like this down here before. It's unprecedented. It's unreal.
Where are you finding people?
Everywhere. We work through the Emergency Operations Center, and we get dispatched to wherever people are calling in from.
Have you seen any looters?
No, I have not, thank goodness. I've seen none and heard no reports of any.
Thank goodness. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So, have people been in trouble?
Oh, yes. I mean, I've done about 110 rescues since yesterday morning.
Well, that's unbelievable. What kind of 110 rescues? Where are you finding people on their houses, in cars?
In their houses and cars, entire neighborhoods. The video I sent y'all earlier was the neighborhood we went into yesterday. I think we took 60-something people out of the one neighborhood. Same thing today. Another neighborhood had been cut off by high water. We got in and brought 52 people out from there this afternoon.
I know you're a volunteer, Will. Quickly, what do you do for a living the rest of the time?
I work with the city of Angleton, where we're working out of right now.
Oh, well, I hope you get a raise for this. You certainly, in my respect. God bless you for doing this. You're a nice person to do that, a good American. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Well, in less reassuring news, North Korea has launched another ballistic missile today, this time one that traveled across Japan before landing in the ocean. Harry Kazianis is Director of Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest, and he joins us tonight. This seems like a provocative act.
It's extremely provocative, Tucker. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not surprised. I think what we're going through right now is what I would call these little mini Sputnik moments. Keep in mind, about 60 years ago in 1957, almost to the day, we keep seeing where the North Koreans continue to just keep testing these missiles. And we keep going through these moments over and over again that we're constantly reminded that the North Koreans have these capabilities. Now, keep in mind, over the weekend they tested short-range missiles. Now the missiles they tested today we think were medium-range. So ones we think that can hit Alaska, Guam, and Hawaii. And then back just a few weeks ago, they were testing ICBMs, long-range missiles. So we're going to keep going through this again, and I'm afraid we're going to keep going through these tense moments with North Korea.
So there are reports that civilians in Japan were told to take cover. I don't think anyone in the region wants to see a nuclear-armed Japan.
Right.
But if you're Japan, there's a big incentive to get nuclear weapons at this point, isn't there?
Well, I have to be honest with you. For the first time, I'm actually hearing some of my Japanese colleagues actually talking about this. I mean, for a country that actually was the only country on planet Earth that was actually attacked with nuclear weapons, considering this is dramatic. But I don't think the Japanese have to go that far. I think what Japan needs to do is to ramp up dramatically the amount of missile defense they have. Because keep in mind, they had the option to shoot this down, and they did not. And that is a heck of a lot of restraint on Japan's part. So I actually give them kudos to that. But I think the most important thing now is we have a tremendous amount of capabilities that we can invest in Japan. Things like Aegis Ashore, PAC-3, all these different types of missile defense platforms. So just in case if North Korea ever thought about doing something like that, actually attacking Japan, they have the ability to defend themselves.
Now that the U.S. government, its leadership is on the record saying we're not going to put up with any of this nonsense from North Korea, what's the thinking behind North Korea pushing the limit again and again?
They want to prove to the international community over and over again that they have the capabilities to strike and strike hard. We know this, though, but what really concerns me, Tucker, is experts here in Washington, experts here here at Fox continue to say over and over, we can stop North Korea from getting nuclear weapons. They already have them. They have the missiles to hit the United States. That happened three weeks ago, and the Washington Post came out with its story that declared that they basically can hit the United States. They have the technology to do this. We need to recognize the threat for what it is and deter it. We deterred the Soviet Union when they had 40,000 nuclear weapons. We can do it again.
Yeah, it's not clear what the option is, for sure. Harry, thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Good to see you. Well, the New York Times has some good news. Your country's native language is being displaced rapidly by Spanish. Why are they excited about that? We'll tell you next. Continue to cover the devastating flooding from Hurricane Harvey in New York. The Empire State Building is dark tonight out of respect for what's happening in Texas. The rain is still pounding that state. Houston, parts of it literally underwater tonight. Meanwhile, a remarkable story appeared recently in the New York Times titled "Spanish Thrives in the U.S. Despite an English-Only Drive." The article highlighted with barely disguised glee that tens of millions of people in this country are now speaking Spanish exclusively and don't necessarily need or want to learn English. The story quotes one recent immigrant from Mexico who never needs English in her daily life. She says, quote, "Everything I need here is in Spanish," she says, gesturing to her bank where the default greeting is "Buenas tardes." Another immigrant who runs a Spanish-language radio station in Des Moines, Iowa, says that illegal immigrants fear deportation, but they don't fear it enough to stop speaking Spanish as their primary language. Quote, "Iowa may be an English-only state, but it's also our state," he says, of the illegals living there. The article goes on to note that Univision and Telemundo rival traditional TV networks in the ratings. Immigrants gather in Spanish-language bars to cheer on Mexico's soccer team. Students in many states can now take Mexican-American studies classes in the place of traditional subjects. The strangest thing about this whole thing is how gleeful it is. Spanish speakers are creating their own society rather than assimilating into the country that welcomed them, and why wouldn't they? The New York Times would be depressed if they did.